If we don't have means, tools, ways in to build creativity as a capacity, we will be working in a very myopic way. We will miss opportunities, and we actually will not innovate in a way that's interesting, that makes it exciting and cool to show up for work, and that actually delivers value, meaningful value to the clients and customers we serve.
That's Dr. Natalie Nixon. She's the CEO of Figure 8 Thinking and a creative strategist who helps leaders catalyze creativity's ROI for inspired business results. She's also the author of The Creativity Leap and more recently, Move.Think.Rest, redefining productivity and our relationship with time. So you'll learn 1, the inner skills that make us more strategic and effective. 2, why not to dismiss your gut feelings. And 3, how to prime your best ideas in 90 seconds. And if you want a quick summary write-up of the actionable wisdom that Natalie shares, I recommend you sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter, which you can find at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Mockaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. Now, here's Natalie. Natalie, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to hear some of your wisdom from your book, Move, Think, Rest. Can you share with us one of the most surprising or counterintuitive or wildly fascinating discoveries you've made in investigating this stuff and putting together the book?
I think one of the most interesting learnings I got was to really leaning into this idea of emotional recovery. I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about physical fitness and endurance so that our cognition is nice and sharp. And we think obviously about mental agility and sharpness. It's really the emotional dimension of ourselves that kept coming up over and over as I was building out this Move, Think, Rest framework. And I think that really matters in a time of ubiquitous technology. It's really interesting to me.
Well, emotional recovery, that's a nice turn of a phrase. Can you share with us, well, 1, a definition, and 2, maybe just paint a picture of what the opposite of emotional recovery looks like, and then what emotional recovery things one does to emotionally recover?
Emotional recovery is our capacity to feel the feels internally, to be self-aware in terms of where our barometer is emotionally, as well as that emotional intelligence, that outward external ability to identify where people with whom we're having conversations, people who we're leading or managing, where they are emotionally. But we actually are not good at the external identification of that unless we are whole emotionally. And I learned this turn of phrase through someone named Scott Pelton. I interviewed Scott Pelton, who's the co-founder of a executive leadership coaching practice called Tignum. And in a time with a lot of economic instability, a lot of uncertainty in the markets, where we're hearing of downsizing, where managers are having to do layoffs, where people are observing their friends, their colleagues, family members going through these sorts of things, to expect a manager or a leader to show up at work like nothing to see here, everything's great, and I'm feeling great. That's not true. And so the ability to recover emotionally after one has had to deliver really harsh news, bad news to a team, to colleagues, is essential actually for your clearer thinking and for your ability to rebound and maintain momentum. And one of the things I've been saying for quite a while is that in the future of work, work will increasingly become inside out work. And what I meant by that, and it's now even more grounded in my learning about emotional recovery, is that the companies that will be able to attract and retain the best talent will be those that are curious about who you are as a person and want to integrate those assets, those capabilities, those abilities into the ways that you are doing your work and your job, instead of shying away from that. And I'm not saying that leaders should have a good cry with their team. That's not what I'm talking about, because there is still this need to feel that the person who is leading has it together. But there's also this need to trust that leaders get where we are. And we trust that when leaders reveal in a more vulnerable way their own uncertainty, when they're self-reflexive in the types of questions that they're raising about a strategic decision that has been made. So another person I interviewed for Move.Think.Rest is Carla Silver, who is the co-founder of a really great nonprofit organization called Leadership and Design. And one of their taglines is, be more curious than certain. And when we are curious about how we are feeling, how we are doing, how others are feeling, how we are doing, that actually is the on-ramp to so much discovery. So the emotional recovery component to work, it's essential now more than ever.
And that's an interesting notion. And we might find ourselves emotionally taxed, or what would you say? What's the opposite of being emotionally recovered? Emotionally drained, depleted?
Burned out.
Burnt out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly. Well, I guess as I think about that experientially for myself, so I'm thinking about just my young kids at home in terms of if there's a lot, I mean, sometimes it's just a delightful, wonderful, happy, joyous, relating, communal experience. And other times it's just brutally exhausting. Like, oh, so much whining, so much. Oh, we got a diaper to handle over here, but there's a mess over there, and sort of all the things in rapid succession.
How old are your children?
Well, so right now they are 7, 6, and 2.
Wow. Full house.
So yeah, it feels like I feel like sort of activated in terms of like the nervous system and my emotions. And it's like, I'm still, and I could feel it. It's like, I'm still irritated about what happened 30 minutes ago over there. And yet I need to be, Mr. insightful, curious podcaster.
Yeah.
Moments later.
I love that you referenced the nervous system just now, because the other part of emotional recovery, the gift that it gives us is a self-awareness. Instead of just pushing through, plowing ahead, if you don't pause to have a personal check-in about how you are feeling, right, then you actually are not fully present. And if you're not fully present, then you actually will not be able to do your job well. So it's a combination of being able to check in with oneself personally, be really honest. It doesn't mean that you'll have a solution to be able to go from frustration to jubilation right away, but even acknowledging it is really important in order for us to be able to do our best work, in order to be able to start to put things in perspective, right? And when you mention the nervous system, man, there's so much more research on the neuroscience of how our brains work best that was so fundamental to how I was putting together this Move, Think, Rest framework. One of the experts that I really have enjoyed learning from, I've listened to her podcast interviews, read her book, is Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's written a great book called How Emotions Are Made. And it turns out that emotions are not reactionary thoroughly, they're actually constructed. And the reason why that matters is a lot of the way we have thought about how to show up publicly, how to show up socially facing in the West and Western cultures is we really take our nod from Descartes. I think, therefore I am, right? The ways that you can judge me, evaluate me is by my thinking, which is true. And it turns out, based on Dr. Feldman Barrett's research, that emotions are actually a bit more predictive than we give them credit for. They're not just reactionary, but they are predictive. So again, that ability to be aware of where our nervous system is at, how we are feeling, is really important. And another thing I learned about is something called interoception. And the book that I wrote prior to Move, Think, Rest is a book called The Creativity Leap. And the subtitle of the Creativity Leap is Unleash Curiosity, Improvisation, and Intuition at Work. And when I wrote that book came out in 2020, I just had this nudge, and through my interviews, I was piecing together my thinking that there are a lot of connections we can draw between intuition and strategic decision making. Now, there's actually a lot more research that connects the dots between the two. And so there's something that all of us have, which is called interoception, not introception, but interoception. Interoception is that self-awareness of how I'm feeling. I feel sad. I feel excited. I feel tired. I feel hungry. I feel satiated, right? And it turns out that interoception, that awareness, which is linked to the nervous system internally, is powered by the vagus nerve, which is the longest cranial nerve in the body. It extends from the brain down through the heart and the lungs into the gut. It's a really interesting, complex system of nerves. So when we say things like, my gut is telling me, it literally is. We have this superpower highway that helps us with sense making, that helps us with pattern recognition. And I'll just share one small research study that I learned about, which shows the connection between interoceptive awareness, intuition, and strategic decision making was as follows. The experiment was to ask people to sit on a chair with their feet planted on the ground and their hands on their lap, and to tap out on their lap the rhythm of their heartbeat, not by touching the pulse on your wrist, by just being still and beginning to tap out the rhythm of your heartbeat. Some people found that ridiculously challenging. Other people were like, yeah, okay. And they would just tap out the rhythm of their heartbeat. That's called interoceptive awareness, and then also interoceptive accuracy. And that same research study was extended to show a link between people who have high interoceptive awareness, powered by the vagus nerve, intuition, also have really great strategic decision making, which was music to my ears because every successful leader has this moment in their origin story where they will say something like, something told me not to do the deal, or something told me to work with her and not him, even though her pedigree wasn't as snuffy. And that something is intuition. So the nervous system, emotional recovery, the ability to intuit and be self-aware is increasingly important in a time of ubiquitous technology.
That's really interesting and totally makes sense insofar as when we make strategic decisions, or really any decisions, there is an emotional dimension at work inside of us. And if we're just blithely oblivious, unaware of that and its impact, we can very well, it makes sense, not have the fullness of the information set to consider and thus make suboptimal decisions. Like, oh, I did that thing. I think few of us have this self-awareness or humility to admit. It's like, oh, actually, I did that because in the moment of decision, I was really angry about this totally unrelated thing. And that probably wasn't the move.
That's right. That's right. Athletes, for example, elite performance of athletes are very aware of their emotions. And a lot of what they're coached to do is to recreate the feeling when you hit the ball that way. If you're a baseball player, if you're a tennis player, or, during the Olympics, I love track, and you'll see the sprinters, they've got their headphones on and they're doing all this big envisioning work and self-affirming talk. And they are envisioning that path of running around the track, or whatever, it's a shorter sprint. But we take it for granted that, okay, yeah, in their work of performance, they have to be attuned to their emotions and to visualize and to recreate. And it turns out that is an equally useful tactic as we strategically build leadership, to remember what it felt like when I made that decision to work with someone, to partner with someone, or to not end up collaborating with this group, or to decide to go ahead and do this product development work. One of the other people I interviewed for Move.Think.Rest is Ivy Ross, who is the head of design at Google. Ivy is also the co-author of an incredible book called Your Brain on Art. She co-authored it with Susan Magsamen. And Ivy likes to share this statistic that 95% of our decision-making is happening at the subconscious level. Only 5% is happening at the conscious level. And she shared that statistic in a meeting where she was challenged about deciding, she was proposing what color story to be using in a product launch. And some of her colleagues who were also in the C-suite said, well, where's the data on that? And she said to them, the data comes from my awareness of culture. It comes from the signals that I'm getting. And then she shared, 95% of the sense making that we do is at the subconscious level, because these are now my words, not Ivy's. We're sentient beings. We do a lot of sense making throughout the day. And to not be aware of that, to not acknowledge that, becomes problematic. And neither Ivy nor I are saying, throw out the quant. We need both is really the point here. The quantitative research and data shows us patterns. It gives us the bird's eye view. We see an aggregation of data at point T90 and not over at point B3. Why is that? If you only make decisions based on quantitative data, you're only getting part of the picture, because quant doesn't tell you why people chose to behave in that way. You've got to dive down to the worm's eye view through qualitative research to understand the why. And I would even then take it another further. There's a tertiary data set, which we get through our sense making and sentient intelligence.
Well, and I love that picture, that vignette there with going through a color story, presenting to executives who want data. It's funny because colors and design in general is just that totally different part of the human experience in terms of, and so you could, it's like, okay, well, hey, we had 5 color options. We presented them to a panelist of prospective consumers who meet the target demographic, and 71% of them liked the orange. So that's why we're doing orange. But, you can't just, well, unless you have huge budget and timeline, just test everything with data. That's the way I think about it is, well, first you have to generate some outstanding finalists based on something else internally, creatively, before you can even get to that point, because it's impractical to test, we tested 800 different colors. Yeah, it cost $8 million and it took us 6 years. But rather than we've got someone who's really understands the vibes associated with the colors and the feels and the associations and the rich history of color theory and all that design stuff.
It's both and. Part of my background is working in the fashion industry. The fashion industry is excellent at incorporating the value of and the role of beauty, aesthetics, and desire in consumer decision making. And it has to, because fashion designers, fashion buyers and merchandisers, the fashion sector knows that as soon as we launch this, it will be knocked off. So there's always this level of urgency and need to discern what's around the corner, what's coming up next. And you can't only get that through the quant. So there's a lot of shopping the market. There's a lot of tapping into what's called the street and the elite, and really understanding what's happening among subcultures and the way trends work. Trends start as signals, and you get signals, Ivy Ross said, you get a hit not by staying in your office. You get a hit, you identify signals by being in the world and observing and being curious and paying attention to that. I call it the blurb on the radar screen, where something just catches your attention. You don't know why, but that was interesting, and just kind of following the breadcrumbs. So it's a combination of approaches that actually yield us the most innovative and resonating results.
Oh, now this is fun. We've talked about breadcrumbs. We've gone down some fun paths. Maybe let's zoom out. The book, Move.Think.Rest. Well, what's the big idea, the big promise of it?
The big idea of Move.Think.Rest is that we will cultivate our best work when we integrate what I call movement hygiene, which is the movement part, backcasting and forecasting, which is the thought part, and intermittent resting throughout our work days, so that we can navigate ubiquitous technology, unprecedented burnout, and new rules for remote work. The whole point of what I call the motor framework, or Move.Think.Rest framework, is to build our capacity for creativity, is to build creativity as a strategic competency, so that we can consistently and sustainably innovate. If we don't have means, tools, ways in to build creativity as a capacity as individuals, as teams, and as an organization, we will be working in a very myopic way. We will miss opportunities, and we actually will not innovate in a way that's interesting, that makes it exciting and cool to show up for work, and that actually delivers value, meaningful value to the clients and customers we serve.
Well, I think I'd like some more of that capacity. That sounds good. Could you share with us a story of someone who took on some of these approaches and saw a nifty transformation?
One example would be my interview with Brendan Boyle, who is a toy designer. And I went out to the Stanford D School where he teaches a course on play. Play is probably the ultimate motor framework opportunity. And the challenge with play is that play has a horrible PR problem. Play is dismissed. It's thought of as an add-on, an addendum to the important things. But consider, and this was one of the things that Brendan and I talked about a lot, consider that all of the attributes of play, which are being able to actively listen, to being curious, having a great ability to negotiate, to collaborate, these are all of the same traits that we say we want in our leadership, that we say we want to hire for. So one way that Brendan has been really successful with the clients he works with to understand that his definition of play is engagement. I mean, you want engaged employees, right? You don't want them checked out because that's a business cost. There's a significant business cost when we don't build these capacities through movement, thought, and rest. But play is the ultimate integration of movement and thought and rest. So when we are at play, we tend to be a bit more mobile. We have to think very differently. We have to sometimes be reflective, sometimes super imaginative. And that's the imagination and the curiosity and the dreaming. It's the forecasting piece I reference. The reflection, the use of memory is the backcasting piece. And it's a rest. It's a break from the typical cognitive load in our neocortex that we only associate with work. And someone I actually interviewed for the Creativity Leap, but her example was something I was reminded of in writing Move.Think.Rest, is Geraldine Laybourne, who's the founder of Nickelodeon. And she would have recess, no agenda, step away from the desk and just come hang out for 30 minutes. And Brendan built on that and said, yeah, that's really powerful and really important because you could have guardrails. Whenever we have things that sound pretty loosey-goosey or improvisational, remember, improvisation has rules. So one of the rules could be no conversation or chat longer than 3 minutes. So you don't hog up the VP's time, right? But you begin to have just playful conversations about, how did you prepare that sauce that you just described that you had for dinner last night, right? You get to learn about another dimension of a person. Again, work becoming inside out. And what's happening when we are at play is that we are allowing the default mode network in the brain to take over. And the default mode network are those different neurosynapses that happen when we tap out of the world and we, as I like to say, get out of our head and into our body. That might be through a walk. That might be through what I do every day, a daydream break. That might be through a rollicking, engaging conversation with an old friend where you're not thinking about the work at hand. But what's happening is that different neurosynapses are at work, which are actually critical for what I call the juicy bits of productivity to happen. So that when you then return to the screen, all of a sudden, that conundrum from this morning, some new ideas are shape-shifting into place. All of a sudden, you have these light bulb moments. That happens when we're awakening out of a really good sleep. That happens during shower moments. And I can share more about kind of the scientific terms for those too, if you want.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, we had a sleep doctor, Michael Bruce, on the show who described the just waking up creative zone as groggy greatness, which I thought was kind of fun. And it's true. I've lived it and felt it in terms of I wake up, it's like, oh, of course, just do this. I was like, well, yesterday it was so hard. What the heck?
Yeah.
So, message received.
I love groggy great. I love that. And the sign, I mean, Dr. Bruce knows this, but when we're starting to drift off, and that's called the hypnagogic state. So Thomas Edison, for example, started observing that when he would suddenly wake up, just as he was drifting off into sleep, he would have these light bulb moments, no pun intended, Thomas Edison. But if he took a nap in the middle of the day, he would intentionally hold a heavy ball or orb in his hand. And as he was drifting off, the orb would fall down. He'd wake up and something that he was pondering would make sense. Now, what you can start to do is you can seed a question in your mind before you go to sleep. And a lot of times the clarity will come as you awake.
Well, yeah, and I also think that holding orbs just sounds like a fun, awesome thing to do.
Why not?
Speaking of play, it's like I'm a mighty wizard of, that's what was it? The Wizard of Menlo Park, right? That was the nickname?
Yes.
And he's holding orbs, just like a wizard does. Well, so what's the movement hygiene part of this?
So we all know we should exercise, but exercise can be a little triggering to people because when we think about exercise, we think, oh, I've got to go to a 50-minute long Pilates class. Ugh. Or I've got to go for a jog that's 30 minutes long. No, movement hygiene is about incorporating movement throughout the day. And it could be things like incorporating a standing desk. So right now, for example, I don't have a standing desk, but I actually need to figure out the brand of this contraption. It's this cool little contraption I put on top of my desk. It can rise, I can lower it. So when I want to stand just to stretch my legs, I can. I'm also on this really cool platform by this company called Fitubo. And it kind of rocks. It forces me to practice my balance and to make sure that I'm not leaning too heavily to one side of my body, which is an example of movement hygiene, making sure that you're incorporating micro breaks throughout the day so that you stand up, empty the dishwasher. You know, when we also think about exercise versus movement, there seems to be more pressure about how long it should last, how intensive it should be. I have walks. I work from home. I have walks around my neighborhood that I know some walks it's going to take me 3 minutes. There's another walk I have that takes me 7 minutes. And there's one short walk in the woods I can take that takes me 16 minutes long. So depending on the amount of time you can budget during the day, there are so many opportunities that you have to incorporate this movement hygiene. And the reason that matters is because as humans, we are designed to move. The spinal cord is an extension of the brain. It's an extension of the medulla oblongata. And if we are sitting for more than Dr. John Medina, who's the author of a series of books called Brain Rules, his research suggests that we shouldn't be doing one particular task for longer than 30 to 40 minutes. If we're cramped at the laptop for longer than 40 minutes for 2 hours, we are constricting blood flow to the brain and therefore restricting oxygen. And therefore, we're actually not doing our best thinking, which is not the goal.
Well, I'm curious for your research. Did you find any nifty random control trials associated with a modest amount of movement, hygiene, mixing it up, resulting in some cool thinking, creativity, smartness benefits?
I mean, I can't name a specific example right now, but over and over again, the research shows that when you are incorporating movement integrated throughout the day and not waiting till you go to an exercise class, it affects more exponential creative thinking because you are activating the way the body is designed to work. And you are not treating the brain as a disembodied part of the rest of your body. When you move, what's happening? You do deeper breathing, right? Which is important for alleviating stress. It reduces cortisol. It boosts serotonin and all the positive hormones that we actually need for these different neurosynapses to take effect in the brain. And one of the things you're already hearing through as I'm describing these examples is that the motor framework is not a siloed framework. It's not first you move, then you think, and then you rest. A lot of the activity that I'm suggesting that we do more is integrative. So when we move, we're also taking a break. When we move and take a break, we're also allowing the default mode network to begin to be activated so that our thinking is fresher and crisper and, dare I say, more innovative.
Beautiful. Well, tell me, Natalie, any key top takeaways you really want to make sure folks looking to be awesome at their jobs grasp when it comes to moving, thinking, resting?
I want them to understand that the end goal here is to build your capacity for creativity. And the ways that I help people think about creativity is that creativity is our ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems. Creativity is not a nice to have. It's not something that only artists are great at. When all of us dedicate and design more time and space to wonder and rigor, then we will be more creative, which means we will actually be more innovative in our work. And so movement, thought, and rest is one on-ramp to building out more wonder and more rigor into your day and into your life and into your work. Because wonder and rigor, which is kind of the umbrella category of my portfolio of work, movement helps you to be more wondrous. There's so much that you can discover if you just go on a short walk. If you take a daydream break, right? That is a wondrous time of your day for 90 seconds. When you commit to rest, that's a type of rigor, right? When you commit to being more imaginative and audacious in your thinking, that's also a type of rigor. But also, it lends itself to greater critical thinking. So the movement, thought, rest framework is really an opportunity to build creativity as a capacity, which matters because people have been dying a slow death at work. They've just been kind of shoved in a copy paste way. And so I want people to shift the ways they've been thinking about productivity. We have an either or way of thinking about productivity. Either you're at work or you're not. And what I'm offering is a both and model rooted in cultivation. So I am provocatively saying we need to put productivity to bed. It doesn't really serve us anymore. It's rooted in the first industrial revolution where we only measure what we see. It's based on speed, efficiency, output. The cultivation model, which was really the MO during agrarian economies prior to the first industrial revolution, we have an opportunity to engage in cultivation 2.0, which is a both and model. We value the solo practitioner and the collective. We value quick spurts of growth and slow. And we value, yes, we should measure what we see, but we also acknowledge that there's a lot happening in the invisible, dormant realm. We need to sleep on it when we need things to percolate and marinate. So the both and cultivation model and understanding that all this work helps you to build your creative capacity.
Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned 90 seconds, was that 90 seconds for daydreaming?
Yes.
Okay. And that's all it takes.
That's all it takes. Sometimes I can afford a 5-minute daydream break, but your prompt can be just watching clouds drift down across the sky or watching ant crawl on the pavement. If you work in a high rise, stand by a window and just kind of zone out and watch all the little people and cars down below and then go back to the work.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask since you mentioned a number and time. So moving, thinking, resting, I imagine it'd be kind of easy to fall into a groove or rut of doing too much or too little of either of them. Do you have any rough guidelines for what's the right rough proportions of moving, thinking, resting to really light up this creative capacity?
The first place I start, as I've been doing more workshops and talks about this, is for people to check in and identify of the three, which is the one that's most challenging for you. And so if you are deficient in movement, that's where you should be starting. If you're deficient on rest, which is different than sleep, right? But if you're deficient on rest, that's where you should be starting. So this is not a cookie cutter model. It's not a sequential formulaic model. It is very much a model that requires you to be self-aware about what's missing in my work habits and what are the new habits that I want to start to develop and start there.
All right. And with that 90 seconds of daydreaming, do you likewise have any short prescriptions on the moving side?
Yeah. I think walking is the easiest and best place to start. But I also, when I wrote this book, when I wrote The Creativity Leap, I wanted to be as inclusive as possible. So I interviewed, for example, Tyler Turner, who's a paraplegic. I wanted to talk about what does motor mean for people who are living with physical disabilities, people who may live in socioeconomic environments where, they can't just go out for a little jog at 6 p.m. because it's actually kind of stupid. It's not very safe. They don't have access to parks and nature. So what does that look like to them? And so one of the researchers whose research I learned about is a Dr. Yancey, who sadly died at age 50 of breast cancer. But her work and her mission, her work was to really catalyze movement in urban environments. And she piloted a lot of programs, the kind of micro movements that you could do in a small apartment in the middle of a busy day at UCLA and at UC Berkeley. So stretching, taking a dance break, maybe that's not part of the culture of your team, but you can certainly do those sorts of dance breaks for yourself privately if it doesn't make sense for your team. If you can't go for a walk outside, can you go up and down the stairs? And again, the author of the Brain Rules books, he talks about how the times that we are kind of static and doing more of that important work of the frontal neocortex shouldn't be longer than 30, 40 minutes. And then peppering it with anywhere from 5 to 15-minute breaks will really do the trick.
Big thanks to Natalie for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is your 24/7 hiring partner. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates that you can manage all in one place. Here's how it works. You post your job and quickly get in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. You can post for free or pay to promote to reach 3 times as many qualified applicants. And you can feel confident that you're reaching the best, as 72% of small and medium businesses using LinkedIn say that LinkedIn helps them find high-quality candidates. From there, share it with your network to let them know you're hiring. And here's a fun fact. If you add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture, you get twice as many qualified candidates. So find out why more than 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/beawesome. That's linkedin.com/BEAWESOME to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. One sponsored checkout is strawberry.me career coaching. Having real clarity and direction can make or break your career. If it seems like you're putting in the work but not seeing your career take off, some coaching might be just the ticket. Strawberry.me matches you with certified career coaches who help you gain clarity on what you really want next in your career, develop a results-driven strategy, and stay accountable. And they can also help you flourish beyond career issues. I had a fantastic session with my coach, Brett, about handling stress from so many responsibilities in so many areas. He was fun. He was wise. He just really got me. We had some laughs and a good time and a good rapport. And he gave me an exercise that has been so quick and so effective for me. I've been doing it every day. So if you're ready to take control and build momentum in your career, go to strawberry.me/awesome to claim your $50 credit. That's strawberry.me/awesome. Because awesome careers don't just happen, you make them happen. One sponsor to check out is Quince. That nip in the air means 2 things. 1, decorative gourd season is approaching. And 2, it's time to check inventory on fall staples and fill in any gaps. And Quince can help with that masterfully, as they have all kinds of goodies you'll wear nonstop, such as a super soft 100% Mongolian cashmere sweater starting at $60. But that low price does not mean low quality. I've been loving my Quince beanie during these cooler temperatures. I treated that hat rough, but it keeps bouncing back and holding up like a champ. And Quince has really emerged as something of a go-to across the board. I keep seeing bags my wife orders from Quince appearing at our doorstep. So keep it classic and cool this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/awesome for free shipping on your order and 365 days returns. That's QUINCE.com/awesome for free shipping and 365-day returns. One more time, quince.com/awesome. Lovely, thank you. Well, now could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
I think a lot about don't let perfection be the enemy of good. I think that's a really important one for me, to not overthink. And I also love the quote, comparison is the thief of joy.
All right. And a favorite book?
I'm reading right now Abraham Verghese' The Covenant of Water. Do you know his work?
No.
I remember mispronouncing it, Verghese. It's Verghese. He's a true polymath. He's a super accomplished surgeon, a medical school professor at Stanford, and he decided to kind of take a sabbatical and got accepted into the Iowa writing program and has multiple best-selling books of fiction. The first of his book that I read, it was Cutting for Stone. I'm also a big fan of J. California Cooper, her book In Search of Satisfaction.
Okay. And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
Right now, I use Otter a lot. I love a good dictation app. I love being able to just download my thoughts verbally. So Otter is one of my favorite tools for work.
Mm-hmm. And a favorite habit?
Stretching. I try to stretch 15 minutes every morning just to remain limber.
And is there a key nugget you share that people really dig and quote back to you often?
Wonder is found in the midst of rigor, and rigor cannot be sustained without wonder.
Mm-hmm. And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where would you point them?
Figure8thinking.com. That's FIGURE, the number 8 thinking.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Have some self-compassion, tap into what makes you uniquely human, and maybe start by reading my book, Move.Think.Rest.
All righty. Natalie, thank you. I really like Natalie's perspective on a 90-second daydream break. We've all got 90 seconds. Daydreams are just fun and refreshing, and it might just spark your next brilliant idea. So much good stuff from Natalie. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1095. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.